Good morning and welcome to my weekly health tips. Today I'm going to talk about fermented food. What are they, what they do, and why is it so important in the GAPS diet? First of all, you have to know that there are many things that you can ferment. Traditionally, we think about vegetables. That's the picture that I chose to show you. You see cucumbers, you can see sauerkraut, cabbage, etc. But although vegetables are the classic, I would say, fermented food, you have to know that you can ferment a lot of things. Examples: you can ferment fruits, and if you do so, or if you buy fermented fruits, it's called chutney. Chutneys are sweet and sour. I discovered chutney many years ago before I knew the virtues of fermented food when I traveled to Venezuela. It was delicious. We can also, that's not GAPS, but if you're able to eat cereals, you can ferment cereals. It's actually recommended to do so because the fermentation pre-digests the cereals. Examples are bread. The way bread was made traditionally was to have it leavened slowly but surely. You prepare a starter. A starter is made of flour, salt, and water, and you work it. You work the dough, then you let it sit and rest for 24 hours. The next day, you go again. You add a little bit more flour and you work on the dough and you let it sit. You do that for 5 to 7 days in a row in order to prepare your starter. And once you have a starter, so it's rising, it eventually bubbles, then you can start making your bread. You make your bread and you keep a part of this dough, which becomes the starter for your next bread, and so on and so forth. That's the way sourdough bread is done, and that's why when people can eat bread, so not on GAPS, I recommend that they eat sourdough. It's the same thing if you were eating a traditional pizza. We were able to find, my husband and I, here in the south of France, a pizzeria owned by a wonderful lady, Italian, and she made her dough herself and let it sit and rise, for 48 hours. And by doing so, not only it tastes good, it smells good, but it's so much more digestible than a regular pizza dough. The crêpes, traditionally crêpes in France, are made by letting the dough rise also. I remember my mother doing that, and she would let it sit all day, or at least 2 or 3 hours before she would make the crêpe. So that's examples with cereals. So you have vegetables, you have fruits, you have cereals. We can also ferment meat, and again in Europe traditionally we do that, and that's why I love so much eating salami, for example, or smoked ham. The Italian smoked ham, which are the best, they're called Serrano, or can't remember the name of my favorite one right now, but they're so Parma from, of course, the city Parma. So these smoked pork ham are delicious, and they're traditionally actually fermented because you leave the meat in a brine, and this brine works on the meat, and then you let it dry for several months. I remember seeing hams hanging from the ceiling of old farms in the Alps when I was a kid. So anything that dehydrates the meat, doesn't cook it, is actually fermented. You can ferment fish, and in Dr. Natasha's book, there is a recipe for fermented sardines. And I have done also fermented salmon It's called gravlax. Delicious, delicious, and very easy to do. You can find that recipe in Sally Fallon's book. Of course, we can ferment dairy product, and that would be cheese and kefir and yogurt and sour cream. And if you're familiar with GAPS diet, you know more about that. But cheeses are also fermented in the sense that, like the meat or the fish, they're left by themselves. Of course, in certain conditions with different ferments, and it will give. In France, we have like more than 1,500 type of cheeses. It always is amazing me. It amazes me how many different cheeses they can make with just 3 milk. You have cow milk, you have sheep, and then you have goat. But the differences in the taste and the texture are so amazing. And that difference is due to the fermentation, which is done differently depending on what they want to accomplish. Fermented beverage are going to be kombucha, kefir, but also vinegar. You can make a wine vinegar or cider vinegar. In the US, we find mostly apple cider vinegar that is made traditionally fermenting, but here I can find wine vinegar. And wine is also a fermented food, as well as cider. I love finding a good cider here. It helps my digestion, actually. You can certainly also traditionally find fermented sauces, and that's Asian. Asian will do fermented fish sauce, the nyokmen, all these sauces that they use with the dishes are traditionally fermented with fish, small fish, and they're delicious and nutritious. So why do we need to eat fermented food? Well, our goal is to nourish the gut flora. I believe that we have an epidemic of poor gut flora. From generation to generation since World War II, we have lost species, many, many species in our gut flora. And I believe that's the reason that we have much more bacteria resistance, that's a given, but also much more disease, like autoimmune diseases. The Lyme patient, Lyme has always existed, but it's becoming more and more prevalent, I believe, because people's gut are not able to defend themselves. If you need to heal anything, basically, in your body from head to toe, you need to work on your gut flora. And I'm also saying from head to toe, so that includes, of course, all the mental, emotional disorder, as in autism, but also depression, anxiety, anything that has to do with brain function is known and recognized now to be on the origin are in the gut flora. Of course, you can have psychological aspect as well, but the gut flora is extremely, extremely important, and we need to feed it the best we can. So that's my tip for today. I hope you will have a wonderful week, and please start fermenting. Go look online and find recipes. You can't do anything wrong. If your fermentation was really, really going bad, you will know it right away because you will have yeast growing in your jars and it would smell awful. So don't worry about messing up and putting yourself or your family in danger. Just go ahead and ferment food. I'll tell you more in next podcast. In the meantime, be well, be healthy, and take care of your gut. Talk to you next week. Bye.